I'm Doug Johnson, and you're watching For Art's Sake. I'm Doug Johnson, professionally known as Douglas C. Johnson. I'm an artist from the Bloomington Normal area, born and raised in Central Illinois. And I did my undergraduate and master's degree at Illinois State University and my MFA at Northern Illinois University. And I showed with commercial galleries in the Chicago area for about 6 years. But for the last 22 years, I've been the executive director of the McLean County Art Center in Bloomington, and I've returned to an active painting practice really for the last 12 years. So this work, I'm grateful to the Parkland College Art Gallery and Lisa Costello for inviting me to show here. This work is all relatively recent work that all details landscape paintings that depict midwestern life. And so all of these works are based on locations around Central Illinois, and they're all constructed as paintings. So while I have source images and locations that inspire the work, it's ultimately the development of the painting itself as object which drives the work to their conclusions. So to that, I'll talk about some of the works in particular. So this painting called Blue Barn is actually the horse barn at Moraine View State Recreation Area just outside Leroy. And the barn itself is in blue if you were to visit it there. But it was an exploration of color, and color is very important in my development of my paintings. So I was playing with color and value and those intensities of warm light offset by the blue form. It was a fun painting to develop in order to build those dark darks amidst that very bright morning light. This next painting, Haying on the Prairie, is actually from a series of images that I captured near Hudson, Illinois in the autumn of 2022. I just really love that raking light across a harvested field, and creating any composition within a square can be a bit of a challenge because the square always announces itself as object, and so I play with that, with the development of the work, bisecting the square with angles of action which allow the viewer to become engaged. It's primarily an exploration of complements with oranges and blues, punctuated by areas of yellows and purples, really with a focus on developing those color arrangements and building that space. This painting is called Quonset, and it's actually based on a landscaping shed near the Illinois Wesleyan University campus in Bloomington. And I have a real affinity for those forms, the same as we saw with Blue Barn, those forms that built that archway as an entity. And again, getting to play with light and getting to build a composition based on complements was an exciting thing to do. This was the last painting I did for the show. Actually, I finished it just a couple days before I brought the work down for the show, and I wasn't quite settled with it. But Lisa made the decision to put it front and center as you walk in, and so it's forced me to really examine this piece. It's atypical for most of my work in that the composition is designed to build up all these tensions of action. The building doesn't resolve itself within the picture frame. The intersection of wires and poles, ultimately within geometric forms, all resolve themselves out of the picture plane, so that builds a level of interest or anxiety or excitement, depending on your take, in the piece. So it was a fun painting to work up. And I'm mostly resolved with it now that I see it outside of my studio, which is always the big challenge when you're looking at work within the context of a studio. In my case, I work on, 15, 20 paintings at a time. And so I'm pulling things essentially out of the stack and putting them on the easel to evaluate. So contextualizing the work within a more pristine setting always changes understandings and allows to see how something works independently from being a work in progress. So that's especially profound with something like this, which again, I only sat on for a couple days before we made the decision to include it in the show. My wife Kristen and I are avid campers and kayakers, and so when it's not too terribly hot, we like to go and explore campgrounds and lakes, and that certainly informs my aesthetic with these next two pieces where I've painted boats. And boats are a metaphor, and boats are kind of beautiful in and of themselves. And so these two paintings are really an exploration of that. This painting, Day Sailor, is from a scene at Moraine View State Park at Dawson Lake. And it was kind of atypical that there'd be a sailboat there. Normally you see bass boats or houseboats or things. So I was really kind of taken with that, but also taken with that light. And oftentimes I'll explore light in the early morning or early evening, that kind of golden hour, but in particular during those transitional times of the year where the light is significantly different in fall and spring. And so this is a painting from an observation that I had in October of a couple years ago. And I just really loved the way the light was cascading across these piers and on the trees and on this boat, which was itself a bit of an anomaly. So I'm very considerate about color, and part of that comes from having studied with Harold Greger, who taught color theory. Actually, he was one of only 6 people to get a doctorate in studio art color theory from Ohio State University, and he had studied at that time and was very influenced by that sort of color, but also Hans Hofmann color theory ideas, where color is used to move around a canvas. And so that becomes an important part of my dialogue when I'm constructing a piece. If we spent much time with this, you'd see, well, there's a lot of primaries here. Blue is my dominant color, yellow is my subdominant color, and red is my subordinate color. And so I find ways to move the viewer, if that's possible, through the canvas by the use of color and primaries. So I have areas of bright red that serve to punctuate the dyad of the dominant and subdominant colors. And so I think about color a lot that way, and how I can construct a painting in ways that can engage color and allow the viewer to have a sense of completion when they view the piece. This is actually my favorite painting, Sportsman, and this is from Chain Lake State Park, which is up, I think, in Lake County on the Wisconsin border. And my wife and I had gone out kayaking on the Fox River, and we're really looking for, enjoying kayaking, but I was looking for something that could be a nice image, and so we were out for about 2 hours, and we came back to the dock, and I hadn't found anything, and then all of a sudden we happened upon this aged Alumacraft Sportsman 2, and I just took a couple photos with my phone, and I went back and was really engaged with that, really engaged with how that worked. And so here, I'm building my color relationships between the complementaries of the blue and the orange that are then, punctuated by this green. And it really ends up being kind of an engaging composition. I'll often have some sort of element which will bisect the entirety of the canvas, oftentimes kind of in the middle, which is something you're formally not encouraged to do, but I like to have every painting have a problem to solve. And so that becomes an exploration of that kind of problem solving. So for me, it's important not just to have those color relationships, but also to build a sense of atmosphere with the work. And we do that, I do that, we do that. I do that by creating an envelope of light, where there is the sense that this whole area is encapsulated with a sense of light. And I go back to what are the rules, which is essentially you have to have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And I really push that structure when I'm painting by being very conscientious of my value structure, by my chroma, building my intensities. So it's not just the arrangement of color. I'll have a fairly, it's a darker blue, but it's more muted, but because it's in the bottom, it pulls forward. But then I'll punctuate all that with areas like this little bit of red, which are full chroma, where it's right out of the tube red, in order to build those color arrangements. I mean, if you took that, the old Hans Hofmann rule, hold up your thumb and take out a color, and does it change the work? And that really does. I mean, you take out that little bit of red, and the composition becomes much less interesting. And so it's those little kind of aha moments that a painter can have when they pick up a brush and add that single stroke, and it can change things. It's a bit of a cartoon, that the artist will hold up their thumb and look at things, and they'll pick up a brush and say it's completed. But the way I paint, I believe that, and I get that luxury of convincing myself briefly that I'm a genius until I look at my next canvas. So this is a smaller study. This is called Sunoco, and this is from an area just north of downtown Bloomington. And there's a couple apartment buildings, which are probably from the early 1930s. And then this derelict sign from a Sunoco gas station. Actually, that sign doesn't exist anymore. I drove by it this morning. But again, I'm playing with building my color relationships. In this case, it's obviously this teal, blue, green versus these reds, giving that sense of cascading light across that space. This is a painting that you've seen several iterations on the same canvas. I think I've repainted that sky and been fairly satisfied about 5 or 6 times, but each time I think, oh, what if I pushed this or that? It's kind of like a chef perfecting a recipe with maybe a little bit more garlic. So, but I love to play with things, and part of my process is that no painting is ever precious. Because I work on so many paintings at once, I'm willing to sacrifice anything at any time. It has to, the painting is what dictates its completion. I don't have an agenda beyond wanting to make the painting work. But I also end up documenting paintings at all these different stages, which allows me to use those as references as I consider, how I've completed something. So for me to put a final varnish on a painting always feels like that's when it's completed. And so I spend a long time looking and evaluating paintings before I'm able to finally do that. And I'd shown this painting in its earlier iterations a couple times, but it was only after I did this rather bold teal sky that I felt that I had completed it. And it's not a naturalistic color. I don't aim for a naturalistic presentation of this landscape, but instead a landscape, a painting which is true to itself. This is a painting called Honker Island, and it's located in Dawson Lake at Moraine View State Recreation Area outside Leroy. And I had been camping there with friends, and I'm an early riser, and I'd gotten up at dawn and was walking the lake, and this island, which I had kayaked around many times, was just glowing as the morning light cascaded across this form and its reflection and the light off in the distance. And so I took so many photos that the battery in my camera died, just because it was so engaging. And so, I chose this as a subject matter for a painting. I've done, I think, 2 or 3 kind of small studies leading up to this. But again, I'm doing that same kind of thing where I've bisected the composition almost in half, and then I have this very centralized form. And those are things which make for really bad design, but can make for a fun and engaging painting. So I'm trying to give that sense of atmosphere, building my relationship between the red, yellow, blue, building that triad, and building those forms and that sense of atmosphere. So it was a fun painting to construct. And it was certainly a great location. Morning Dock is another one of my small boat series. My friend Greg Coos says that I paint modest resorts, and I have a modest lifestyle. So, painting these sorts of things, again, up very early, walking the lake. This is up at Chain Lake State Park. Just that serenity of flat water in the morning and those reflections, they resonate with me, and it's a restful painting. Again, I don't spend a lot of time resolving detail. I always prefer to infer action instead of describe action, and it ends up feeling pretty restive for me. So this painting is called Freedom, and it's based on a Freedom gas station on Linden Street in Bloomington. Actually, I drive past this gas station at least twice a day. And for me, it's a great exploration of this big field of blue with this sky. I spent so much time essentially doing the math on constructing the automobiles and the light and the form, and then to have this relatively expansive area take up the vast majority of the painting's composition, but in fact, the paint you're seeing on the surface there was only about 20 minutes, 40 minutes in painting. That said, I repainted that sky probably 15 times before I came up with a point that I felt it was set. So I have a lot of affection for midwestern architecture. I look at a flat roof building, and I think, well, it is kind of Bauhaus inspired. The utilitarian aspect of cheap construction has superseded that. But the idea of constructing a building which is incredibly democratic in its lack of hierarchies, that certainly informs us. The idea that there is a Freedom gas station, that we would name a gas station Freedom, feels ironic to me as well, since our fossil fuel industry has certainly made us in many ways less free and presented all sorts of global problems. So it felt ironic for me for that. But I very much like those kind of transitory moments of daylight, where we still have light in the sky, but we have all this artificial light, which is providing our sense of space. It is essentially creating a chiaroscuro. This idea of a dramatic light and revealed truth that we see in Rembrandt's paintings. And so this painting with its artificial light is in many ways kind of a counterpoint to the Sunoco painting, which is also gas station related, but the same thing with that flat roof architecture, and playing with this idea of form being hit by light across a field of action. So I enjoy those sorts of dialogue that you can construct with the painting. This painting is titled Benjaminville, and there used to be a town of Benjaminville between Downs and Leroy. And this was the location, actually the building of a Quaker meeting house. It still exists. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. There's a cemetery behind it and an old farmhouse off to the side. And again, I'm playing with a lot of these ideas of color and space, where I've set up these compositional elements which have dominant blue, subdominant yellow, and then subordinate red, in order to build that space and create that envelope of light with all that kind of action between those spaces. And I repainted the sky several times, and in the end I stuck with this blue, but it's painted in a manner that's thin enough with broken color that you can see previous bits of blue behind it, building that space and atmosphere. If it had been all flat, it would read as a skin. But because I allow color to poke through, it automatically creates a sense of atmosphere that I couldn't replicate if I was mixing color live as I was painting. This next painting, Mucky Duck, that's at Lake Bloomington, just near Hudson, Illinois. And again, Kristen and I were out shooting photographs in the autumn light at dusk. And I happened upon this marina at the lake. And again, there's that kind of wabi-sabi element of careworn structures that really engaged me. But there was such striking light across the composition that it was exciting to try to play that light. And so, here I'm playing with my reds and yellows and blues. But I feel like if I'm going to include those colors in my dominant, subdominant, and subordinate, I need to really kind of complete, Hans Hofmann, complete the color arrangement. So for all this yellow, it's punctuated by areas of purple in the shadows in order to build those color relationships. So I'm always thinking about how I'm constructing color and how I'm building space with sometimes competing agendas, but it makes it lively. And for me, every painting is a problem to be solved. And it's always exciting when I paint myself into a corner and have to think, what's the way I can resolve this and still retain my core values of color and structure and light and atmosphere. White Barn, it's actually, I think, a corn crib. This is a barn that's north of Normal, and it was just an exploration of this great morning light on this kind of careworn structure. Building my cool arrangements of blues and greens, punctuated with a little bit of red, and that morning light, that yellow light against the kind of cool atmosphere that we get in mornings. So this painting is of a grain elevator in Carlock, Illinois. And I was driving past Carlock coming back from a conference, and it was great autumn afternoon light. And so I drove into town to scout for potential locations, and I saw this great grain elevator. In so many small towns across the Midwest, the grain elevators are these castles in the middle of town, the castles of commerce, and it caught this light in a really unique way. And so, for me, I constructed this painting to do a lot of different things, but part of it was to kind of move the viewer through the space. And so we have the element of the road and the reflection, those yellow oranges playing against the blues, the element of the railroad barricade, jutting into the air. Ultimately, it just became a fascinating bit of dialogue of form. And when I'm making paintings, I like to think, what would this composition be if none of these elements were if none of them meant anything. If you didn't care about grain elevators, if you didn't care about these towns, what would be the forms that would engage you? And so, you know, creating these images of places that I have an affinity for, but constructing them in a way that the painting is predominant, that has become really important for me, to make sure that it's a good painting and a good composition, first and foremost. And I'm willing to sacrifice detail. I'm willing to you know, abandon specifics in order to make the painting successful. This is a painting of called November Road, and this is in the Leroy area. And I go out 3 or 4 times a year at dusk or before dawn to shoot a series of photos, potentially as references. And I was really taken with this curve in the road and this cascading morning light. You know, this area of warmth, that orange, against a composition which is by and large very blue and cold, and building that sense of space and light. And I've been very happy with the painting. It's a little different response. I like, as much as I have some paintings like Honker Island, which everything's centered, this is a painting which is really constructed about this small section, you know. And for me, I like a painting that it's almost cinematic, in that there's an area of action offset in the overall composition, so the viewer gets to explore and kind of find things independently. So it was an interesting painting, a challenging painting, but one that I'm very happy with, especially those clouds. You know, I will often work with kind of a monochromatic area for skies. You know, in this case, it's you know, subtle variations of the same blue, playing with you know, minor shifts in warmth and cool or tonality, but constructing those skies with efficiency. And so, you know, that becomes exciting for me when I can resolve something with not just efficiency, but with some artfulness, you know, where I can allow things to exist more or less on their own. This is really a study. This is a house in Leroy. It's one of those stately houses as you make the curve going through town, and I was just really taken with the way the light cascaded across the form. This is really a study. I think I spent 45 minutes on this painting in total, but it has a freshness that I find really engaging. And occasionally I'll do a painting where I'll start working the painting up, and I'll take a step back and look at it and think, I could work on this for several more hours, but it'll never be more interesting than it is now. And that was the case with this painting. I felt like, there it is. So it's fun to kind of have those moments. I tried at one point to replicate this painting on a larger scale, but it wasn't more true than it was with this study.